right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about Godzilla, King of the Monsters. The Godzilla franchise has inspired a lot of movies, as we kind of talked about on our Top 10 Movie Monsters special episode a couple weeks ago. And today we're going to be just talking about the movie, the new one, which is, of course, the sequel to 2014's Godzilla, although it is a new filmmaker and mostly new characters. But it does continue that universe, and it's going to continue setting things up for next year's Godzilla vs. Kong, which... that one I really hope I love. This one I'm a little mixed on, but, we'll talk about that as we get into the conversation. So before we do that, and by the way, my guests for this episode are, once again, as we did on our Glass episode earlier in the year, I've got both Ryan Daugherty and Clinton Freeman on, so it's going to be a fun nerd fest episode. But... before we get into it, I do want to remind you, make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together on your podcast app of choice, or of course on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, TuneIn Radio, and mostly every other podcast app out there. And you can also follow us on social media at PiecingPod. So one last thing before we get into this episode, I want to let you guys know that we are sponsored today, again, by our friends over at the Golden Tiki. The Golden Tiki is a bar here in Las Vegas. It was recently named one of the top tiki bars in the United States by the Food Network, and they are one of the 10 best nightlife destinations in Las Vegas, rated by USA Today. And it is a really freaking cool place. They've got all kinds of stuff happening. I've been telling you about them the last few episodes. Today, I wanted to mention some of their upcoming events. They've got coming up in June, they've got Smooth Sailing, a yacht rock adventure. They've also got 80s Night with the New Waves. They got the Swank Bastards coming up again. Pope Paul and the Illegals. The Hypnotiques coming up in July. They got so much stuff happening at the Golden Tiki. There's always some kind of event or DJs. It's a great place. So much to check out. Great drinks, great specials, and they are definitely a bar to check out if you're coming to Vegas. So check out the Golden Tiki, and thank you to them for being a sponsor. Let's get into the conversation about Godzilla, King of the Monsters. All right, so it is time for another super all-out battle of a nerd fest episode of Piecing It Together.
Showdown.
Joining me,
Showdown.
yes, showdown. I was hoping someone would fill in the blank there. With me again after our wonderful Glass episode, we got with us Ryan Daugherty and Clinton Freeman. Guys, glad to have you back.
Happy to be here.
Yep, happy to be here.
So, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. To be honest with you guys, as the week has gone on, I have just this movie. I've kind of like forgotten most of it already. It's just such I don't know, just in one eyeball and out wherever the hell it goes. It's like it's gone. But I've got notes and I've got thoughts, and I'm sure you guys do too. I was so looking forward to this, even though I hated the 2014 one. But I overall though, and I mean we'll get into it as we get into these puzzle pieces. As much as I'm kind of making fun of it at the top, I did like it quite a lot more than the last one. That's one thing I will be able to say right away.
Which doesn't say a lot though.
Yeah, it doesn't say that much. And I will say one other thing going into this before we jump into some puzzle pieces. I've talked to both of you beforehand, and it seems like we all have very wildly different takes on the movie. So. Yeah. I think that's going to be interesting. So why don't we go with Chad first? Chad, what do you got for your first puzzle piece?
Okay. I guess I'll go with Pacific Rim as my first one. And I'll say this right off the bat. Very much a lot of similarities where, of course, it wasn't monsters versus the monsters. It was, big giant robots that they were controlling. But you've got that element. You've also got that all of the fighting was like in water of some kind, like in Pacific Rim, it's out in the water and there's lots of, splashing around and it's mostly dark. And this one, it's always dark and raining. and I didn't like the way it was shot, though. I felt the Pacific Rim did a better job because I thought it looked better. My biggest complaint with this movie is that it just doesn't look good. I don't think it looks good at all. We can go ahead and throw another puzzle piece in there that kind of relates with what I'm saying, though, and that's Batman v Superman. Everything that people complained about that movie are my complaints with this movie. It's like the screen was just too dark. It's like I can't see any detail. It's constantly raining, and it's either washed out or it's like blackness. So it's like too bright or just blackness, no detail. So yeah, I didn't like it, as you can tell.
I think you could combine in there with that. I mean, it's not really a puzzle piece, but I don't watch the show, but I saw a lot of people online complaining that they couldn't see anything in that Game of Thrones episode, and so I think that's kind of, you're absolutely right. That's like, to me, the biggest problem with this movie, even though I think I did like it more than you did. Everything is just covered by darkness and water and rain and more water and more rain and darkness. And it made it hard to see things, and it made you kind of wonder, why did they stage every single fight over water? You know, why couldn't things come on lands more? Yeah, Ryan, what do you think? Because I know you liked it more than both of us.
Yeah, no, I was so surprised that I liked this movie. Like, I was amazed at how much I liked it. This definitely surpasses. I think the most pleasantly surprised I've been recently was probably with that Predator movie, which was awful, but I loved for some reason. But this one, I didn't see Kong Skull Island. I didn't see the Gareth Edwards Godzilla. But I was so excited to see this one, but then everyone was like, "Oh, it's awful," and I'm like, "Yeah, they're probably right." Like, I'm not like expecting it to actually be good, but I had a blast. And the first thing I want to talk about, a very dumb puzzle piece, is I think there are a lot of ways you could link it to a lot of the Marvel movies, but I specifically need to talk about, from vaguely what I understand, in Kong Skull Island, Monarch was just like, yeah, we're some dudes with a little plan. And then suddenly it goes full goddamn Avengers, how they have the helicarrier, and the first Avengers, all of a sudden, S.H.I.E.L.D. is just like, yeah, this is our aircraft carrier that fucking flies. Monarch has 90 goddamn outposts throughout the entire country, with all these like crazy like oil posts and stuff. And I just suddenly was like blown away by how like whole secret society the whole thing was. And it just 100% reminded me of the first Avengers, with everything coming together and all that big, like, scale up.
I'd like to add to that every single one of those outposts had O'Shea Jackson Jr. was there.
Right.
His character is literally at every single one.
For no reason, too. He did absolutely nothing.
But I love him, so that's cool.
Maybe he was cloned. Yeah.
he was like 6 of the Titans. Like, that was like really what they build the outposts around.
So true. But I think that's an interesting point. And that's one of the weird things. And you didn't see the last Godzilla, so you wouldn't have this frame of reference. But they start this movie off as if we know these characters.
Right. Yeah. That part was very strange.
Because none of them were in the last one.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
You know what? Actually, I kind of want to jump right off with you saying that to another puzzle piece of mine, which is all of the Blank of the Apes movies that have been going around nowadays. Because I feel like I get the same way with that every time, like the Rise of Planet Apes, Dawn of Planet Apes, where every time I come in, I feel like it's like, oh, we're in the second movie in a trilogy with this set of characters, and you get like some introduction. And this Godzilla one, I was like, wait a minute, like, I vaguely know who was in the first Godzilla, and this is none of these people. But clearly, like, we're just supposed to assume we know why all these people have done these things, and maybe we even think it's the plot of the last Godzilla movie or something. But no, and then I don't know with Godzilla vs. Kong, I don't know if they're doing that again, and it's going to be a whole nother set of people, or if it's these guys again.
Yeah, I believe a lot of this cast is carry over.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I believe so.
They still have time to change that.
Well, they've already shot it, so I don't think they're going to.
Just CGI more people.
I'm glad they've shot it, because after this movie, I was kind of worried that we weren't going to get it.
Wouldn't. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go back to Ryan's Avengers puzzle piece and jump off
Sure.
of that because my first puzzle piece is going to be Avengers Infinity War.
Sure.
Specifically because Vera Farmiga's plan is very, very Thanos in nature.
Right.
Feeling like she is somehow the good guy by wanting to unleash destruction and kill millions of people. And I, again, just like with Thanos, with like, hashtag Team Thanos and all that, I think there is something to be said for her plan because, yeah, overpopulation is a fucking disaster. And, it is kind of destroying the world, and I just think that maybe she has a wrong plan to go about it. But I think having a villain though that has that kind of a like a warped sense of right is an interesting thing. And of course, Infinity War was only a couple of years ago, so it's hard to say that it truly would be a puzzle piece. But then again, knowing this movie's like difficult production history,
Sure.
I have a feeling they were probably writing that right up until the time it made its way into the theaters. So it's very possible that it was actually inspired by Infinity War.
Well, and it's so just like so underexplored too. It's like
Yes.
I mean, they could have went with that, and I think developed that to something very, very strong, and they just kind of half-assed it. It's like I mean, like she's not really she's the villain, but then it's like she's not, then she is for like 5 minutes,
Sure.
and then it's like, oh, no more. She's not even.
Yeah, and Millie Bobby Brown is basically just not even in this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, she just shows up once in a while to add a little bit to the runtime.
Yeah.
Which honestly, better than I was expecting. I think that's one reason I was very pleasantly surprised. Was I saw this kid in the trailers and I was like, oh my god, this kid is gonna like save the day by like bonding with Godzilla. And it's gonna be so fucking stupid. And then it was just like, oh, she's just a kid who like steals something when she throws a temper tantrum for her mom. And I was like so much more on board with it than like how there were a million other ways they could have awkwardly forced a kid in just to like open the appeals. Like the appeal to the mass audience.
See, I'm going to disagree with you on that. I'm going to disagree there. Sure. I think it would have been way much better if they'd gone like Peach Dragon and she like, was the Godzilla whisperer. I would have bid for that.
They always do that though, and I'm so sick of that in these movies. We don't need the one kid the alien likes, like.
But yeah, she pretty much just kind of walks around. She that's kind of what she does in the movie. She walks around. Everybody else pretty much just stares at computers. She walks around, and that's what they do. and they scream sometimes.
Well, Chad, what do you got for your next puzzle piece?
I was gonna say, so yeah, that was the thing too. Like I was thrown off at the beginning of this though with these characters because I was like, I don't remember them, and then I had to actually go because it's been a while since I saw Godzilla, and I didn't like it either. I didn't even remember, and I'm like, yeah, they're not even in that. And in fact, as soon as I saw Kyle Chandler pop up, I was like, what is this, like the sequel to King Kong? Because he was in Peter Jackson's King Kong, which now he's going to be in the new Godzilla versus Kong movie. And so,
oh my god, I didn't even think about that. That's fucking weird.
No, it is. So anyway, back though to puzzle pieces. So yeah, I was trying to think of ones where like humanity was the problem. Humanity was the virus that needed to be dealt with, and nature fighting back, and The Happening, which is perfect because it's M. Night, and this is kind of like our follow-up. This is our sequel to our last episode in our trilogy of Showdown.
The sequel nobody asked for.
So yeah, the Happening, that was the for me. And again, I think with this one, this was still kind of a under used like theme that they could have carried through. They could have carried it through with what she wanted to do, also with what the monsters were going to do, and really played into that. Like The Happening. I mean, The Happening basically it really sticks to that, and it's kind of like a an Al Gore movie in a way, to where it's
Sure.
like, we really are pieces of crap and we've screwed up things, and eventually, the Earth is going to get us for it. So that's basically what The Happening says. And in a way, they could have done that here, but they just kind of just like, yeah, well, they're gonna, but no.
Yeah. It does seem like they should have done more with the environmental aspect.
Yeah.
It would have given the movie more purpose rather than just kind of shoehorning in a little bit of that kind of messaging into what ultimately is just, a bunch of monsters fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Ryan, what do you got for your next puzzle piece?
Well, I'm citing a movie that I know I've cited on this podcast before, but I forget which. And I'm so glad to get a second chance to talk about it, which is the South Korean movie called D-War or Dragon
I knew
War,
this was about to happen.
which has just one of my favorite final showdown scenes of these decently CGI'd, some of them are pterodactyls, some of them are dinosaurs, some of them are real dragons, some of those are the snake-like dragons, just everything up against the military shooting at each other, and it's just such a surreal scene that I never thought I would get to see in film again until I saw Kyle Chandler go, "Nah, we got Godzilla's back on this one," and then suddenly, a bunch of Apache helicopters were playing a game of, we're gonna kind of annoy Ghidra just to make it slightly easier for Godzilla to rip his fucking head off, which I loved so much, to see the idea of the humans go, "Got it, we are inconsequential, but we will be the best distraction we can. You can do it, big guy." And there was definitely a lot of that in D-War, and just seeing it kind of working through the streets and stuff. Oh man, I fucking love this movie, man. I was so happy when I saw it. I'm smiling now. It wasn't a good movie. I'm certainly not claiming that. But I enjoyed it a ton.
That's awesome. Hey, I just want to say that on piecingpod.com, our website for the podcast, you can search for episodes by filtering by what movies we talked about and try to find which episodes we talked about which movies in. And D-Wars is now going to have been talked about on more episodes than literally hundreds of classic movies. So congratulations, Ryan.
Oh man, it's what it's all about. It's a real masterpiece of cinema. You have to have it under as Dragon Wars and D-War too, because we need to make sure there's thoroughness in case our audience.
Yes, I'll double check the tags when I get a chance here.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I too do love that movie. It is such terrible CGI though. It really is. It does not hold up at all.
No, it doesn't. But it's just good enough to be wow, they actually tried to make all of these things.
Yeah, no, it is an amazing movie. It really is. But yeah, I would say though that I prefer the fight scenes in that movie, even though the CGI is bad, to the ones in this one, because at least I can see what's going on. So
yeah.
Well, speaking of monsters fighting, my next puzzle piece is Rampage. A movie that I loved, and not a lot of people did, although Ryan liked it.
Yeah, I was so pleasantly surprised by that one, too. I think I'm just a sucker for, if monsters fight each other, all my standards and expectations just plummet. The same thing with Rampage. I went into Rampage being I'm gonna hate this movie. It's so dumb. And I was, texting Dave, and I was this is amazing.
Yeah, it is. They take the premise of monsters fighting and they actually fucking deliver monsters fighting. And, they could have easily just not done that and you get 5 minutes, 10 minutes of it. But no, they actually deliver on the premise. And yeah, it's dumb as shit, but there's lots of monsters fighting. I love Rampage, and I think that Kong Skull Island, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, has some really great monster fighting sequences. It's I would actually say that Rampage has the better ones. Rampage is still my gold standard when it comes to monsters fighting, but this one does have some pretty great monster battles.
All right, so golden standard monster fighting. I'm gonna go then with a classic here then. King Kong Escapes, which I did recently rewatch, and that movie is still awesome. And so this is definitely one of my puzzle pieces for this one. Because I mean, really, there's a lot of similarities. In this, though, they build this giant robot. Well, this evil guy does, and it ends up being that King Kong has to come in and save the day and fight this giant robot that he modeled after King Kong. And it's a cheesy showdown, as all of those old monster movies were. 1976 is when this one was made. But having purposely rewatched that one after I listened to the monster episode that you guys did. I did a triple feature of Kong movies, though, because I'm more on Kong than Godzilla. I'd watched the original King Kong, and then King Kong Escapes, and then King Kong versus Godzilla. But this was the one that I thought of when watching the new movie. So very much I felt there was some King Kong Escapes in there.
I'm not sure if I've ever seen it. A lot of the old classic King Kong and even Godzilla as well movies, they kind of like blend together in my mind because I haven't seen them all since I was a kid. So I'm not sure if I've seen it, but lots of great, like, fun, ridiculous monster battles back in the day.
Oh yes, definitely.
And by the way, I like that you clarified that it was the evil guy that created that robot. So,
right.
Thanks for making sure to mention that. So Ryan, what do you got for your next puzzle piece?
Yeah, so I want to go back a little to the not fully delivering on the interesting premises for the bad guys, like the eco-terrorism and stuff like that. And that really reminds me of something that, like, one thing I really do like about the classic Godzilla movies is they were very firmly, at first, all, like, deeply entrenched metaphors for, like, serious issues, in Japanese culture and history. And then we've got this new one, which, like, sort of pays lip service to it, but really doesn't develop it at all and just kind of throws fight scenes. And in that way, it's exactly like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. Because the original Star Trek did, like, a lot of really good, like, we're going to talk about these, like, real issues and explore things and in society. And then the J.J. Abrams movies are just like, oh yeah, space racism, whatever, explosion, and just like completely. It's just like it like touches on what's all about. And don't get me wrong, I love the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies too. I am still a sucker for those as well. But it just, like, it rings so hollow in that, like, that was, like, part of, like, you can almost feel that, like, in the spirit of some of the older, like, Godzilla movies. And here, the spirit is like, oh, it's fun and it's cool, but there's not that, like they try to make it mean something, but they don't dig into it at all.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really great observation, to be honest, because they don't dig into any of those themes that really are so central to this this franchise. And Star Trek was kind of the same way. That did that same exact kind of thing of just going for just the fun angle and just the genre angle. And yeah, I mean, one thing though I will say regarding that puzzle piece is a lot of people talked about the 2014 Godzilla as if those kind of themes were the only thing anybody should want out of the movie, and they shouldn't want giant monsters fighting.
Yeah, I do respect the Gareth Edwards movie for doing that, and I do think that they were able to get away with being a little dumber in this one, specifically because they had sort of covered some of that other territory already with, the Gareth Edwards one.
Right, like they'd already gone down that road and tackled issues, and now they're like, okay, we got that out of the way. Let's just let's have
now. Let's
fun.
Let them wrestle.
Yes, right on. Well, good puzzle piece. So I'm gonna go with my next one. And Chad was just talking about King Kong. I'm going to talk about King Kong again with Kong Skull Island. And obviously, I usually try not to use puzzle pieces that are technically a movie within the same series. But I wanted to bring this one up, though, because of the cinematography. While we've established that a lot of the times it does look pretty ugly because of the darkness and the all the water and the rain, at times it does shine through with some really cool cinematography and some great looking shots that are, you know, somewhat reminiscent of kind of like the stage that was set with like Larry Fong's cinematography in Kong Skull Island. Mostly scenes with Mothra or like the reveals of some of the monsters. Unfortunately, they do not stick to it for long periods of time, but some of those shots are clearly inspired by the direction that Kong Skull Island, I think, was trying to take this whole MonsterVerse thing. You know?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I love the way that movie looks. It's so beautiful. Oh, yeah. It's so beautiful. But again, I am a bigger fan of Kong than I am Godzilla. And I'm just like, I wanted more of that when I went into this movie. And of course, that movie, it's, you know, it's pretty much like a ode to like, you know, the Vietnam movies, especially like Apocalypse Now. So I realized that this is a totally different beast. But still, I was very disappointed because that one, it looks so beautiful. And then this one was just like ugly.
The only
it was like most of the time
with the cinematography in terms of references was, and I thought this was a really interesting decision when we were talking about how like hard it was to see some during the fights. The camera did such a better job of tracking the fighter jets than it did any of the monsters. And half the time I thought I was watching like a Top Gun style movie or like something like that. Of like, and it was honestly, they had some genuinely great scenes, I thought, where it would be like they would do like a continuous pan and like pull back and change the camera, and suddenly it's like you almost feel like you're in an anime or something, seeing all these giant monsters in the distance and the like fighter jets right there. But like I just remember being so taken by like, yeah, there was the really beautiful imagery like you're talking about, but like the like quote unquote coolest shots in the movie was just every time the jets came on, suddenly the camera was like, all right, we know exactly what we're gonna do now, and like it would be like framed like really tightly and track it perfectly. And I was like, where is this going? Like, where was this?
Get those cameras on O'Shea Jackson Jr. So where are we at here? We're up to Chad. Chad, what do you got for your next puzzle?
I think it's Chad, yeah.
Where are we here? I'll just go ahead because I've got a bunch of things written down here. I'll just go with a fun one though. Because again, I was going back to you know, what I talked about earlier with the happening about how basically, you know, the human race is terrible, and you know, the monsters coming to punish us in a way. But I just was thinking about movies like that where you know, people are just, you know, scumbags and they're the villain. And Bambi, you know, Bambi is what came to mind.
Bambi, King of the Monsters.
Well, I just think that if they went more with, I think maybe more making at least Godzilla more humane and really making him like the hero and making him heroic. I think they could have sold that angle a lot better. Just like, I don't know, he didn't have any personality to me, but again, I don't know. I think he looked a little weird too in this movie. I mean, he always looks a little different, obviously, but I don't know. There was just something. It didn't seem like Godzilla almost. It seemed more like Jurassic Park whatever. So, but yeah. So you know, and here's the thing, Bambi. I don't know if y'all ever saw the short Bambi meets Godzilla. So I thought that was a good tie-in too. The classic short Bambi meets Godzilla, which they used to show when I was a kid, like late at night on the cable channels, like during music video, like you know, after like midnight or whatever, the channels would go to where there's just nothing but music videos all night, and they'd throw in random shorts, and Bambi versus Godzilla was one of them. But anyway, so
that's fantastic. I did not know that's a thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's probably on YouTube if you want to look up Bambi versus Godzilla or Bambi meets Godzilla. Yeah.
So is that canon?
It's like a cheesy animated thing like somebody made. Like if YouTube had existed, this would have been like a YouTube video back in like whenever, like maybe the 80s.
That would really, if Bambi was basically the exact same movie, except instead of Bambi's mom getting shot by a hunter, was just Godzilla stomped on Bambi's mom, but pretty much the rest of the movie was exactly the same. It would just be a very weird moment in the film. It like wouldn't change, but it would just be like, oh yeah, and then there was that moment where Godzilla showed up out of nowhere. You're like, this is a very interesting Disney movie.
But
not what I expected.
But think about this. Think if it's Bambi, but it's not Bambi, it's Godzilla, okay? And so it would be the humans shooting Godzilla's mom, okay? And see, to me, that would just be a better movie. So.
Ooh. I mean, to be fair, like every Godzilla movie ends with them finding eggs for Godzilla's baby. So you're getting that at some point.
I'm sure.
Well, we did kind of, I guess, with the Godzilla, the what was it, 98 or whatever.
Yeah.
Did they do that? It was eggs. They showed eggs.
They were like baby Godzillas or something. I don't remember.
No,
it's been such a long time.
I don't even remember.
Yeah, there was definitely eggs in the Roland Emmerich one.
Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, Ryan, what do you got for your next puzzle piece? You're following up Bambi, so it better be a good one.
Yeah, okay. So, honestly, really, what I would call my generation's Bambi, which was Alien versus Predator. So I think, a lot of the Godzilla movies do this, but you don't necessarily see it in the big budget American, any sort of monster movies nowadays. Which is the like, oh, we're going to team up with one of the monsters against the other monsters. A lot of times nowadays, it's either like, let's get out of their way and let them fight, or it's just humans versus just one monster. But getting to do the whole like, hey, Godzilla, you're probably pretty bad, but also, three-headed alien dragon, clearly a bit more of a dick. Let's team up and work on this guy. And I always love getting to see how somehow they're going to have the human kind of help, even though they're basically like contributing nothing to the actual fight. Like in AVP, the human like at one point stabs one alien and they're like, is that good? And the Predator's like, yeah, while destroying 9 million of like the queens and stuff. And here, like what? Like we were basically just like, I think all the weapons we had were kind of the equivalent of just poking Ghidra in the shoulder during the fight and being like, hey, Ghidra, look over here, and like a little bit distracting him while Godzilla does his nuke breath. So we tried, and that's why it's like AVP.
Yeah, kind of like Mike Tyson and mosquitoes attacking him or something.
Or maybe it's like better than not helping at all. Right. But
yeah, it's weird that we can't seem to make giant monsters fighting without trying to squeeze in all the human shit.
Yeah.
Like it has to happen. Like there's no way that they will ever greenlight a movie that is just monsters fighting and humans are just running.
Well, I think you just more need to look at much, much lower budget films for that.
Yeah. What's a good one? Is there a good one that's like got a lot of monsters?
Oh, well, what I was gonna cite almost as a reference, because this is the first movie that's come out in a long time that has actually been similar to this, which is the series Kaiju Big Battel, which is more or less like underground indie WWE wrestling style things, except they are all set up dressed as different kinds of monsters and robots to fight the monsters, and the props they do will always be like giant like cardboard boxes that are the cities and stuff like that. And they'll do all the dumb like rivalries and bullshit they do for like wrestling, except in the context of like King Kong has got beef with Godzilla and stuff like that. And for a long time, these were like homages to the old Godzilla movies, especially because in those ones it was usually dudes in rubber suits fighting each other.
Right, right.
But they stopped making those crossover fight movies for a while. So Kaiju Big Battel was kind of lampooning this thing that wasn't necessarily directly relevant again. And then Pacific Rim kind of bringing it back, and this bringing it back. really is just like if you can find like a live DVD of Kaiju Big Battel or some videos of there online, and you want like just like sure the human drama is just basically people doing smack talk, and then it's all the fighting. You gotta go Kaiju Big Battel.
Yeah, I just googled Kaiju Big Battel, and the first pictures that came up did not disappoint. Let me just say that.
They're I think they're based in Philadelphia nowadays. I actually was talking to someone at a bar and then found out they run it nowadays, and I'm like, okay, I've been hearing about this thing and saying I got to go to one of your shows one of these days for 9 years, and he was like, yeah, it probably would have been better if you went to one or two of them at some point, because
Well, I'm going to go with my next puzzle piece, and a lot of people have asked me what I thought about this movie since it came out, and the first thing I always say is that I would place it somewhere between Independence Day 1 and Independence Day 2.
Nah.
And so the Independence Day series is my next puzzle piece, which has always been known for... first of all, being just a giant, big spectacle, and that's really what it comes down to is what it's about. But of course, they just have to mix in a bunch of dumb characters, some of which are more memorable than others. Of course, the first one are much more memorable than the characters in the second one. Of course, like I tell most people, this kind of leans more towards Independence Day 2 for me, but it mixes that same kind of just all outright just watching destruction happening on screen for minutes and minutes at a time before we then go check back in with the dumb human characters. So yeah, the Independence Day series is my puzzle piece here.
Well, I had Independence Day written down as well. I think I think Independence Day kind of set the template for the whole disaster movies, and we're going to cut away over here with these people, then go over here, we're going to go to this city, we're going to do this, almost like a newscast sort of thing, like a big disaster is going on, so then you have the disaster while this is all cutting back and forth. Yeah, this did such a piss poor job of doing it. And like you said, why is Ice Cube's son everywhere and he's not even doing anything, whereas in Independence Day, you remembered the characters and you remembered scenes specifically with the characters, even when it had nothing to do with what was going on. It's there were interesting things that they did. There were interesting characters. Whereas this, none of the characters really had much of any personality at all, and they really didn't do anything either. So yeah, I think that this one, kind of phoned it in, but yeah, I think they definitely were okay, let's do Independence Day, and they just kind of use that as a blueprint.
And while we're talking about these characters, did anybody else find it strange? And I should mention, I talked about this on another podcast, the Screen Fix podcast. Give them guys a plug real quick. That episode will be up soon. But I was talking about this on there as well, that the Bradley Whitford character is basically delivering lines that a goofy stoner should be delivering. And then what's his name from Silicon Valley is an esteemed, high up in a company. And it just seems like their characters should be reversed.
Well, they wrote that they deliberately based Bradley Whitford's character on Rick from Rick and Morty, which
really,
yeah, no, it's not an accident. They decided to make a real world version of him, which is not an accident, but maybe a war crime of some sort. It was an interesting decision, to say the least.
That is so strange. Oh my god, that's weird. Well, Chad, what do you got for your next puzzle piece?
Let's see here. So we talked about Bambi. Okay. So the first thing that I thought of when I was watching this movie was actually Transformers: The Last Night. And the reason why was that pretty much that movie, just like this movie, I'm watching them and I'm just I'm saying to myself, I should be liking this. Why am I not enjoying this? What is going on? And it's just, there's something about the way It's that whole superficial thing that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Both of them are just very, very superficial. This one, though, didn't even have a character like, Mark Wahlberg's character in Transformers that you could kind of cling on to, or kind of like that Tom Cruise, like, War of the Worlds character that's just like doing these ridiculously, amazing things when like they're just like an everyday Joe that shouldn't be able to, jump all over these places. It was missing that.
I think The Last Night specifically is like a great comparison too in terms of like what they're willing to throw into the movie.
Right.
Like Transformers is like, oh, this is a movie about giant robots fighting. Fuck it, let's throw King Arthur in there. And this one is like, oh, this movie about giant like monsters fighting. Yeah, what if one's an alien? And also, we blow up Atlantis in the middle of the movie for no reason.
Right.
Like they drop Atlantis in there, and they're like, yeah, we're not going to worry about this. And King Arthur just showing up in goddamn Optimus Prime's biography, like, it's like, yeah, fuck it, let's just throw it in the mythos, and like it's rule of cool taken to 11.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's very Michael Bay without like the sophomoric humor and the here's a Megan Fox look-alike.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Speaking of the Atlantis scene, just a total aside, but was anybody else thrown off by the scale of that Godzilla can fit in it?
Oh, it had to have been huge, yeah.
Right, but when what's his name is like swimming through with his little ship, it seemed like it was like it was like just like a big building, but Godzilla is the size of giant buildings. And he fit inside of it.
I think they just didn't want to show us 9 minutes of real time of Ken Watanabe dying of radiation poisoning. Which is a movie I would see, because I love that actor to death. But, like...
That's the summer blockbuster right there. So, what do you got next, Ryan?
Just one I'm going to kind of throw out there. We're not going to talk about this too much, but it's a very disparaging term I throw around. When any movie eventually starts feeling like The Core or Sunshine, and we got that right in the middle of like, oh no, our ship doesn't work, there's nothing we can do. Someone's got to manually activate the thing, as soon as that happened, I honestly thought that the next 40 minutes of the movie was going to be one by one everyone sacrificing themselves. Until it was like just like Kyle Chandler there, like making Godzilla strong again or something like that. And especially Sunshine, because that was that, I guess all of them are really much just like, we need to use a nuke for something that a nuke should not be able to help with at all. And I think the idea of, like, especially because he was like, yo, how many nuclear warheads do we have? And then Ken was holding one, which given how super crazy strong that like Fisher was that Godzilla was recharging at, I'm not really actually sure just one nuke should have been all that helpful, to be honest.
It's a good point. I don't know nuclear science well enough to really
I can guarantee you know it better than whoever wrote this movie. Same thing for The Core, right? When it's like, oh man, the middle of the earth stops spinning. What do you want to do? Let's dig a hole and drop a nuke in it. And that'll probably work, right?
Well, I'm gonna go with my last puzzle piece actually. And this one we skated past Jurassic Park earlier at one point, but I'm gonna specifically bring up Jurassic World. And that is kind of in a similar reason with the Independence Day series, actually. It could have combined with those, but it's just like these movies that try to find this balance between monsters or destruction or, any of that kind of stuff and just a bunch of characters. And of course, in this movie, especially, the characters are in some form of control room and watching things unfold on screens or through windows as, monsters are wreaking havoc until they're thrust into actual danger outside with all the creatures. But I felt like the Jurassic World movies are really, bad about this, and this takes a lot of their same tendencies towards just really cheesy one-linery characters in control rooms watching giant monsters destroy the rest of the world.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I thought specific Jurassic Park for me, just like some of the real close up scenes. Um, would you see just the big giant eyeballs and that sort of thing of the monsters? I don't know. I'm not real big on any of the Jurassic Park movies, so I probably associate it all with the first one.
Yeah.
But yeah, this felt
Chad,
very.
do you not like the Steven Spielberg ones either, or is it just the new ones that you?
No. I did not like the original Jurassic Park.
Oh, okay.
I didn't care for it when it came out. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, the first one's so good, Chad. It's so good. But
you're just
right.
racist, and you like that Samuel Jackson got killed. That's all.
Oh no!
Hang on your butts.
That's what I always remember about Jurassic Park, because I remember. Of course, these days it would be multiplied 10 billion times that. But I remember thinking it was so funny that somebody told me how racist that movie was, because Samuel Jackson was the first person to get killed, and he was black, and so that made it a racist movie. And I was like,
that was a sign of the times. That happened in every movie back then.
I can't think of Samuel L. Jackson dying in movies because Deep Blue Sea has so permanently ingrained as the definitive Samuel L. Jackson death that nothing else. You're like, oh, he dies first in Jurassic Park. I'm like, maybe, I don't know. My brain doesn't store that information. It only has his Deep Blue Sea death saved in every file.
Is that how you'll see his actual death when he dies one day down the line?
Definitely. I will imagine it went down.
He is never going to die. I mean, he's looks like he's 30 something, and he's probably 70. I mean,
he simply can't.
So
it'll take a lot.
But again, I mean, going back to what we're talking about how the characters are just kind of there and not really memorable, and how it wants to be like an independent state. Yeah, Jurassic Park, it's a good example also of one of those movies where you remember characters. I mean, even somebody like me that doesn't like that movie, and I think I haven't seen it since I saw it at the theater, I can specifically remember moments with, certain characters. And then, of course, some of them have become memes that, of course, live on forever. But this movie has none of that.
Right.
That was one of the big complaints early on, is that I was actually okay with the human interactions with this movie, but I didn't feel like that was a family at all. I don't.
Oh, I'm 100%. Yeah.
I don't see that as mom, dad, and the kid. It's just no, those three don't go together. It was such a weird. That's the most unbelievable thing, is that was a family.
Above any of the monster science, that's it. And I agree completely.
So as Ryan was talking about, though, how he didn't want this to. Halfway through, he thought it was going to be where each of them were getting picked off, and he didn't want it to be where Kyle Chandler saves the day and that sort of thing. But for whatever reason, I thought of that kind of sounds good to me, and I was thinking, yeah, put Gerard Butler in there. So then I'm like, okay, we got to go ahead and throw in the classic Geostorm, which I don't think I've gotten to.
Oh man, I thought you were heading towards Rain of Fire, and I was getting very excited because I do believe whenever I talked about D-War, I talked about Rain of Fire as well. So if I can get Rain of Fire on this podcast a second time, you have no idea how happy I will be. Because if we're talking about Samuel L. Jackson's death in Deep Blue Sea, there is only one better death in cinematic history, and it is Matthew McConaughey in Rain of Fire.
Okay, so here's a Rain of Fire. I actually started to watch not too long ago. I haven't never seen it. I don't know why it's a Gerard Butler movie and I haven't seen it. But anyway, I was get back to Geostorm. Okay, so again, same thing. All this destruction, all this craziness going on, and the problem with Geostorm is that none of it really looked very good. So it was like a disaster movie that lacked that pulling me into the disaster. And then at the same time, all the characters are just so forgettable. I mean, besides, okay, here's Gerard Butler and he's going to space. I mean, other than that, That's all it had going on for it. And I think, though, had you put Gerard Butler in this movie, I would have been more sold. But again, I just kind of wanted to bring up Geostorm, I think.
Yeah, it's always a good episode when we could bring up Geostorm. So shout out to Chad for doing it.
It's Ryan's fault. He made me think of Gerard Butler.
It's okay.
Nice.
Don't ever fight it. Don't ever fight it.
So is Rain of Fire a puzzle piece? I need to know whether or not to write it down.
Hey, I got the assist there. You assisted me, I assisted back.
Yeah, we got Geostorm. Sorry, Chad. Thank you. Geostorm and Rain of Fire are puzzle pieces there, David.
Beautiful. It's on the list.
Make sure they're both written down for myself and my good friend Chad here.
Yes, I got it.
Real subtle.
So, what do we got next? What's up next, Ryan?
This is one of my last ones. It's not a big one, but one thing that I was really struck by, again, returning to the multiple locations, which is something I love they had in this movie. And there was a little bit of a cock tease, like in the beginning when he's like, yeah, we've got like 19 Titans by now. And you got to see like 4 of them. Like as soon as he said 19 Titans, I was so excited to get to see all these other cool character designs. And you also see that the Monarch outposts, it's not just there's 19 of them, there's like 40 of them. And the number one thing that reminded me of, especially because there was a bit of the like corporate bureaucracy going on, was Cabin in the Woods. How they've got the facility in Cabin in the Woods that, it's not set around a big monster movie set, but it's set around a small horror movie set. And they have all these other locations and all these other countries that sort of have that region's equivalent of what a horror movie is. Whereas with this, instead of horror movies, it was monster movies. There was, the Mayan monster. There was the South African Chinese. Mothra was Chinese monster. All these different like offices and facilities built around regional equivalents of something sort of fantastical. And it was the same thing with Cabin in the Woods. I always wanted to see all those other facilities. I always wanted to see all those other monsters. And here in Godzilla, we got to see maybe 6 of the other monsters. And like one of them was just a woolly mammoth, so that doesn't even really count. So
well, didn't he have like human arms though?
Yeah, it was like a woolly mammoth with like kind of like gorilla arms kind of thing.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool looking, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it was pretty cool looking.
Let me see the other 19.
And so that was one of the ones. That was one of the like new ones, right? Because aren't some of the monsters like from the old movies, and some of them were just like they made up for this movie?
So, you mean in terms of like the old ones, meaning like only Rodan and Moth, like the named ones were.
Okay.
But Rodan's interesting because they did sort of try to make Rodan tough in this one. Rodan historically is just a pterodactyl. Like, totally different class of, like, Godzilla versus Rodan is nothing. Because, like, Rodan is basically the equivalent of, like, human versus, like, a pigeon, right? Like, it's not a huge, maybe, like, a slightly large pigeon. Like, you're gonna fucking destroy the pigeon, even if you can't shoot laser beams out of your eyes. So, it was nice that this time around they were like, yeah, let's, I guess, give him a lava back and make him really, really, really big. But all the other ones, like Woolly Mammoth Guy and the one that looked like the Muto, those are all original for this one.
So, you know what, that puzzle piece, and that is great. That's a good puzzle piece. That reminded me, I actually did have another one, and I forgot about it when Chad brought up Batman v Superman earlier. Batman v Superman was going to be one of my puzzle pieces as well, and I forgot to mention this. The reason why is because of the scene in Batman v Superman where they're seeing on the hard drive the little glimpses of all of the other DC superheroes that you're going to get to supposedly see in future movies. And that reminded me totally of how they, are seeing all this footage of all these giant other monsters who may eventually be in the MonsterVerse at some point.
It's funny to me because I also semi-considered Batman versus Superman, but for the like Doomsday being from outer space kind of thing. Just like you got to fit in an alien somehow with Ghidra of like, oh no, why is Ghidra not following the rules? but what if he was an alien? And it was like, all right, I guess everyone will team up against an alien.
Well, the other thing though that's like Batman v Superman is I think this has to do with the fallout of.
You can't have it as two puzzle pieces, Chad.
Well, collectively, right now, it sounds like it's been cited 5 times.
Yeah.
So the whole fallout of Man of Steel, and I know there were some other movies too around the same time with all the mass destruction, and you can't have that in movies. So in Batman v Superman, they made sure it was like, okay, this is deserted. There's nobody here. All the workers went home. I felt like all the scenes with the monsters were like that as well. Like there were no scenes where it was like mayhem going on, and there was like it didn't feel like that there was like any threat to people. It almost felt like everybody was
sort of actually specifically did like that with this one.
Well,
just for the sake of like, I feel like so often the monster movies do the like destruction porn that it's gotten kind of boring. So this one was just straight up like, nope, the whole ground, it's just set pieces for the monsters fighting. It definitely lacks some of that like oomph, but I think it served a different purpose.
Interesting takes. Yeah, I think what Chad's saying absolutely makes sense, and I think what Ryan's response is totally makes sense too, because that is done over and over and over again. But at the same time, it's like it's just almost always. I mean, I complained earlier about it being over water a lot of the times. It's like a lot of the times it would be good if they kind of spread it out a little bit.
Well, hopefully Godzilla goes to Skull Island, and we have the showdown on land. That would be awesome.
Yes.
So
that would be awesome. Well, what do you got next, Chad?
I was going to bring up this is another one, kind of weird one, but actually Rob Zombie's Halloween, the 2007 Halloween movie, simply because so much of what I came to see with that movie, of course, it being a horror movie, being a slasher, you want to see cool kills, you want to see like what's going on, and he played it more of hiding in the darkness where you didn't really see what was going on. There was a lot of shaky camera movement and a lot of just like what am I watching here, it being too dark, which is a trick that you can do and you can get away with low budget horror. But when you're talking high budget horror, or if you're talking big budget monster movie, I don't expect that. So I'd say my disappointment with this movie was kind of in line with that one. I kind of feel like, and the filmmaker of this, he's a horror filmmaker. And I kind of feel like that it's almost like he was trying to play this as a horror movie in some ways, almost like a low budget horror movie, in that way of some of the details are just kind of fuzzy and hidden, instead of being more spectacle. I expected more spectacle. I feel Kong Skull Island offered way more spectacle. So
sure.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and he is an interesting choice for this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't really talked about that, but those weird little horror movies that he's done leading up to this, very strange choice. But I mean, generally speaking, I mean, even though I didn't love the movie, I mean, I think he did a good enough job with taking on the reins of something this freaking insanely huge.
Yeah. Like, Gareth Edwards was like an obvious choice for a more muted Godzilla movie of like stuff in the not focusing on the human stuff more, right? Because like that Godzilla movie was basically just his first movie, Monsters, but with like double the budget,
right?
But like this kind of out of nowhere was like, yo, you made like an anthology horror movie once, do you want to have $90 million?
See, I did like Krampus, which he did.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, I did like that one. And it's like it kind of has a bit of like Gremlins flavor to it.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a fun movie. I don't know. I kind of feel like he was a bit out of his element, but I don't know. They
totally.
like, I mean, the Adam Wingard, he's doing the the Godzilla versus Kong, and he did the last Blair Witch movie. So they're doing kind of, I don't know, giving chances, I guess, to these.
It seems like they've got some sort of logic to it that just is not obvious externally.
Yeah, right. Well, Ryan, you got any more?
No, that is it for me.
All right, Chad, what else do you got? Run them down.
Yeah, I just wrote down a couple of other things. I mean, like Cloverfield, I think an obvious,
we'll get to Cloverfield at some point in this conversation.
It was mentioned earlier. Ryan had mentioned the ape movies. I actually specifically thought of War for the Planet of the Apes, which of course is another one I love. Which that and Batman v Superman are probably. It's got to be high on the list of number of mentions in episodes. Watchmen, another one I thought of, because again, like Thanos, the villain is kind of some good to what they're saying, but at the same time they're going about it terribly wrong. They really half-assed that here, but that was one of them, and yeah, I think that was about it. Yep.
Well, we got a huge list here, so I'm going to run down the list of the finished puzzle, and then we'll get into any of our final thoughts on Godzilla, King of the Monsters. So we have got Pacific Rim, Batman v Superman, about 5 times, the Avengers, the Planet of the Apes series, Avengers Infinity War, The Happening, D-Wars, Rampage, King Kong Escapes, J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, Kong Skull Island, Bambi, Alien vs. Predator, Kaiju Big Battel, the Independence Day series, Transformers The Last Night, The Core, Sunshine, Jurassic World, Geostorm, Reign of Fire, Cabin in the Woods, Rob Zombie's Halloween, Cloverfield, Watchmen, and War for the Planet of the Apes. So, we're getting to the end here. I just want to say, Chad kind of mentioned this earlier, and I think I didn't even realize it until he mentioned it, but I think it is probably the biggest problem with the movie, for me anyway, is if you're going to have human characters in one of these freaking movies, at least have a hero. And there's not really a hero here. Mm-hmm. There's just a bunch of scattered characters, and they all kind of have separate little things, and none of them really amount to much, and none of them really combine in any meaningful way. Like you said, the family element never really pays off. And so it's like, at least if you're gonna have to have characters, have a big dumb hero.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
No, not a Rock. That's not what I said.
Yeah, the Rock would be perfect. Come on,
not too big and dumb.
And there's a big gorilla, and it's Rampage, and it's great.
So here's what they could have did though: is more humanized Godzilla. Again, you go back to War for the Planet of the Apes. You really have this humanized. Basically. Go back to like Frankenstein, a humanized monster is the hero, which is generally how King Kong is. But Godzilla's never been, really humanized at all. And I think that they could have did a whole Pete's Dragon thing and totally, humanized Godzilla more. But I don't know. I'm all for a hero, but yeah, no, not The Rock. Anybody but The Rock, and not Vin Diesel, and not Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves is having a good year, man. He should have been in this. Actually, I guess I'm glad he's not in this.
I would have been okay with it.
So, Ryan, you like this movie the most of the three of us. So, what final thoughts you got?
I don't know. It delivered what I wanted to see, which was the monsters fighting. And the thing is, I think a lot of I'm not a big fan of the cutting every 25 seconds during a fight scene sort of style of editing, but I was very acutely aware of the fact that this was not a movie where long takes during fights were going to look very good. I think a lot of the jumpiness and the shakiness and the monsters fighting in the background was probably a good call, because otherwise at a certain point it does genuinely still just kind of look like two dudes in costumes wrestling with each other and looking pretty stupid. Like that one shot that they always showed in the commercials of like Godzilla running at Ghidra, like flailing his head around, it was like right on the border between super cool and incredibly goofy. So I'm almost okay with the not being able to get the best clarity on the fighting. I would prefer that and leaving my mind to fill in some of the gaps of the imagination than to just see how awful it would actually look if they had to act it all out. And I think that's why I like this movie so much, is because my brain is just filling in the gaps of, yeah, big monsters beating each other up. So I'm happy to admit I'm like being deluded by this film.
Well, I would as much as I didn't love it, I would say that, it's, probably my favorite, recent movie with Godzilla in the name. Of course I haven't seen any of the recent foreign ones. But as far as American ones are concerned, it's definitely the best one, I think.
I'd have to go with the 98 one, simply because I really like the soundtrack of that movie. Back in the late 90s, they had great soundtracks for movies. They really did.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Puff Daddy.
It's weird that this Godzilla felt like an Independence Day, but the Roland Emmerich Godzilla didn't feel like an Independence Day.
That is weird. That is very weird. Well, I think we've wrapped this thing up. We'll skip our usual movie recommendations for this week. But I do want to give you guys a chance to plug anything you want to plug real quick. And then I have one last question for you after we do that.
Yeah, I do think if you can look up and support Kaiju Big Battel, they are actually a great organization. It's a great gimmick, a fun kind of entertaining thing. You see some creative costumes out there, and honestly, it just makes me jealous and kind of want to make a monster costume of my own and start smashing around and just call it, exercise.
Nice. That is the best kind of exercise, I think. Chad, you got anything you want to plug?
No, I don't. We hadn't, I think we briefly mentioned, Millie Bobby Brown. I think she's great, and I was disappointed she didn't have more to do in this one. I know she is going to be in the next film, so hopefully they give her more to do, make her more interesting, more likable. Make her the hero. Even I know Ryan doesn't want that, but I'm all for that. So.
Right on. Well, that leaves us with one final question before we wrap this episode up. Guys, was this a Cloverfield?
Oh, I don't know. It is tricky because, is it as nonsensical as Cloverfield 1? Yes. Is the camera footage as messy and are the monsters as inconsistent as Cloverfield 1? Yes. Was this directed by an indie director who kind of took a swerve in a big budget film? Yes. I think I think my gut instinct would have originally been to say no, this is not a Cloverfield, but every bad thing about this movie makes it a Cloverfield. It's very much a Cloverfield 1, not a 10 Cloverfield Lane is my official ruling.
Okay, interesting curveball there. Yeah, and there was actually one point when they were showing all the monsters, I got really giddy because I thought I saw Clover.
Oh, there's one that looks. I think it looks like the Mudos from Godzilla 1 kind of look like Clover too.
Yeah, and I only saw him for like maybe a minute in Godzilla 1.
I know which one you were talking.
Obviously, there's no monsters
about in this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I would like to call this a Cloverfield. I would like to, because
I think it is.
Obviously, this movie is not doing that well. However, Godzilla vs. Kong is going to happen, so there is a chance that the MonsterVerse can continue. And I would like to see, Clover become a part of this whole world.
So, Dave, if you got to choose between a Cloverfield versus Godzilla or a Pacific Rim versus Godzilla.
Well, I would choose for the Cloverfield paradox to have never happened.
I think that's a fantastic decision. And I think, unfortunately, some things are so great that nothing can ever accomplish them.
Real quick, Chad, what's your verdict? Is it a Cloverfield?
Oh yeah, it definitely is. I remember it seemed like y'all said that Glass was definitely a Cloverfield. If it is, then this definitely is.
Yeah,
there's a lot of similarities with the Secret Society. Think about that. I was talking about Bambi. Like, think about Bambi as being Godzilla. What if the Glass movie was Godzilla and the monsters, and you put 3 of the monsters in like this nut house? Anyway,
that'd be great.
So yeah, I mean, totally a Cloverfield. It has to be.
Well, that's a great answer. Everybody, catch us next time on Everything's Cloverfield.
Yes.
Ooh, he agreed with me. I'm stopping it. I'm stopping it.
Hey, I'm Josh Bell.
I'm Jason Harris. Hey, Josh, we're friends in real life, but we're also co-hosts on this new podcast called
Awesome Movie Year, where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies and do a deep dive looking at movies including the Best Picture winner, the biggest movie at the box office, future cult classics, and more.
Including the biggest flop. And this season, we're doing 1994. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. That could be Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify. We're all over the web as well at Awesome Movie Year on all the socials and awesomemovieyear.com. So please like us, subscribe, and if you do like us, give us a 5-star rating because we love you.
All right, so that does it for today's conversation about Godzilla, King of the Monsters. And that promo that I just played was for Awesome Movie Year, which is a new podcast that I'm actually producing. It's going to be here on the All Points West network, and it features friends of the show, Josh Bell and Jason Harris. You've heard them on a few episodes here and there. I'm piecing it together, and they are the hosts of it, and I'm actually going to chime in here and there on each episode too. So if you enjoy piecing it together, you should definitely be checking out Awesome Movie Year. It is launching July 3rd. I'll, of course, be posting more info about that in the show notes, and maybe we'll even post one of the episodes here in the feed so we can get a little preview of the show soon. So that does it for today. I want to remind you all, as always, please make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together on your podcast app of choice. And if you listen on iTunes, actually, it's not called iTunes anymore. iTunes is dead. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, that's right. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, you should rate us and review us. 5 stars would be awesome, and leave a review. Let us know what you think of the show. We always want to know what you guys are thinking of the show. And I want to give one more plug also to the Screen Fix podcast. They're friends of the show. We're going to have those guys on the show soon. You heard Lady One for a little bit on our Avengers episode, but we're going to be doing a full episode soon. But I actually joined them this week to talk about Godzilla. So if you want to hear me talk more about Godzilla, you should check out Screen Fix. What else we got going on? You should be joining the Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces groups. That way you can chat with us about all these movies that we always talk about. We would love to have you in there. And you can follow us on social media at PiecingPod and check out our website, piecingpod.com. I think that about covers it all. Why don't we leave you with a piece of music? I've got a piece of music here. I don't think I've ever played it on the show before, but I think it would fit for a Godzilla type of a thing. It's called Destroyer, and this is just like a piece of library music I made years ago. It's not on any of my albums, but enjoy it anyway, and we will be back this week with another episode of Piecing It Together. Should be a Dark Phoenix episode going up in a couple of days, so lots of good nerd stuff happening.
and all points west.